So Josh, one
Yes.
of the things that President Obama said continuously throughout his presidency is he wants to hear from the people. He wants them to organize and put pressure on him
Right.
to take the right position.
Mm-hmm.
I think both of us have different perspectives.
Right.
I'm of the perspective that you're a leader, be a leader, don't wait for the public to push you. You,
Well, Obama did go to the grassroots twice, in 2008 and 2012, when he needed to get elected. As soon as he was elected, he didn't go back to the grassroots. So I think that's nonsense. When he really needed and wanted something, which was to be elected and re-elected, he understood that the power had to come from the bottom up. But then once he got in office, he was playing golf with John Boehner all day long. That is not what we needed. That is absolutely not what
so
we
what
needed.
happened under his
And on
presidency?
on the environment, we had the largest environmental catastrophe in the United States history with the Deepwater Horizon explosion, which poisoned the Gulf for generations to come. We had the worst mining disaster with Upper Big Branch mine collapse, which killed dozens of miners due to lack of regulation in the mining fields, and the absolute horror of mountaintop removal, which organized a lot of people against it. We had the worst nuclear disaster on the face of the earth with Fukushima. We had the worst storm in history with Hurricane Sandy that clobbered New York City and emptied the Atlantic Ocean into the subway system. And we had probably the two arms of the fastest growing environmental movement that this country's ever seen in the climate change movement, largely led by Bill McKibben at 350, and the fracking movement and the fractivist movement, which exploded like wildfire all across the nation. We've never in history had more political capital to get off of fossil fuels. Never in the history of the United States. That was people being mobilized in the streets. That was squandered. I can't tell you how many times I went to Washington, D.C. to say to these people, you don't understand what's happening in the streets. You don't understand what's happening out there. You're out of touch. In fact, the last time I went to D.C., it was to argue against offshore drilling in the Atlantic Ocean. It was like I had to go to them at CEQ and say, are you absolutely out of your mind? This reads like a headline in The Onion. Obama approves offshore drilling in the Atlantic. It's like all of a sudden we forgot what happened with the Deepwater Horizon. So, to say that whole line of, oh, make me do it. FDR said, make me do it. That's total nonsense.
Especially when there's a timeline like climate change.
Yeah, well, I mean, climate change.
We're organized. Number one, we're organized already, better than ever. But you're also fighting a timeline that just doesn't keep up with your political rhetoric.
Well, yeah.
Okay, so what can Hillary do? We're going into the platform committee meetings right now to talk about climate change. How can Hillary respond differently than Obama and be better than Obama?
Well, there's this whole idea that Hillary is pragmatic, but there is a whole different pragmatism when it comes to climate change. Let me just break it down really simple. We've already warmed the Earth by 1 degree. Because we've warmed the Earth by 1 degree, we've seen more severe storms, droughts, floods, all these changes. The ice caps are melting. Everything on Earth that we need to stay frozen is starting to melt. We have 30% more acidity in the ocean. Havoc from this just 1 degree. We have another half a degree in the climate, in the pipeline already, because we have enough CO2 and methane and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. If we turn everything off right now, we get to 1.5 degrees. Now here's the problem. At 2 degrees, we get between 5 and 9 meters of sea level rise. We bring about that process, not immediately, but over time, unstoppable, 5 to 9 meters of sea level rise. Now that means say goodbye to New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Boston, Cape Cod, Miami, Berkeley, Oakland, Charlotte. I mean, the only thing left of Florida will be Orlando, which is right in the middle. That means we can't build any more frack gas power plants. And Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's plan has been to change out all the old dirty coal for gas. And that gas is the worst fuel that we can develop for climate change. So there's no way you can reconcile building 300 new frack gas power plants and a future that doesn't warm by much more than 2 degrees. The Democrats can decide, do they want 300 frack gas power plants, which will be in operation for 30 to 40 years, or New York? Or Boston, or Philly, basically the East Coast.
Hashtag that.
You can't have both. You can't have the 300 frack gas power plants and the East Coast. You have to choose which one you want. And this is what I'm going to Orlando to tell them. The problem is that Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and the Clintons have taken all many of them, have taken money from the fossil fuel industry from time immemorial. Hillary supported fracking all across the world as Secretary of State with her Global Shale Gas Initiative, and she has a history of ignoring the populist causes and going with what the corporate advisors are telling her. And right now, that is bad news for the climate. So you can't say, I'm a pragmatic leader whose policies will destroy the East Coast. If it was a war or a terrorist attack that threatened to destroy our major coastal cities along the East Coast, you wouldn't take incremental changes and say, well, maybe this will do the trick. You wouldn't say, I'm going to change alternate side of the street parking regulations or, build a fence. We wouldn't do these things. We would take the necessary action to defend our cities, to defend our lives. To ignore the fracking issue right now and the natural gas power plant issue is to be a whole new form of climate change denier.
So Democrats are essentially, by allowing the acceptance of fossil fuel money into our own party, we are quietly climate change deniers. There are Republicans who are in your face and Democrats who are just saying one thing, but their record does not match their rhetoric.
Well, what scares the shit out of me is that the Democrats could lose this election on fracking and TPP alone.
How?
Well, Donald Trump could camp out in PA, Ohio, Michigan, all the Rust Belt states and say, I didn't vote for NAFTA. I didn't vote to send your jobs overseas. But right now, Hillary Clinton is supporting the TPP, right? And her platform, we tried to get them to get off the TPP and they said, no, we're not going to oppose TPP. And all the fracking states are major swing states: Ohio, PA, Colorado, New Mexico, Florida, North Carolina, Michigan.
Are there
and there's a significant part of the population that might. I don't think fractivists will ever vote against their own interests. I don't think fractivists are going to say, oh well, I should vote for this person even though they're going to frack my entire backyard and deprive my children of a future. Or if they do, they'll go to the polls like this. The truth of the matter is presidential elections are won by enthusiasm. They're won by getting out the vote, and they're won by enthusiasm. And what scares me is that on trade, TPP, which also affects the environment, climate, and fracking, they're handing these issues over, or they're handing over a group of people that could actually campaign for her and refuse to. The Democrats don't want to be on the wrong side of that. There are people protesting these power plants all across the nation, and the Democrats got to get on the right side of this, and that's why we're going to Orlando.
So everybody who agrees with us, hashtag, what's our hashtag?
Fossil fuels are so last century. No, our hashtag is Mickey Mouse Democracy.
Yes.
Because we're on our way to Orlando.
And tweet Hillary Clinton, tweet the Democratic Party, sign the petitions. There's a bunch on change.org. Send the message to the party that we can no longer accept fossil fuels.
It's also, the hashtag should be Nomiki Mouse Democracy. But
Goodbye.